So it's here, the first film in the Marvel's Phase 3, and I am way too small, so give me 1 second. There it is. Okay, sorry about that. So Ant-Man is directed by Peyton Reed and stars Paul Rudd, Michael Douglas, and Evangeline Lilly. So after getting out of prison, Scott Lang is given a second chance by helping Hank Pym plan and pull off this heist to prevent all this bad stuff from happening. And it's coming off the big giant blockbuster that was Avengers Age of Ultron. And I have to hand it to Marvel. They've done it again. I mean, they've taken this relatively unknown property. Not a whole lot of people know about Ant-Man. I mean, unless you're this huge comic book fan, you're not going to know a whole lot about him. Because if you've never heard this character before, you're going to see the poster in this and be like, Ant-Man? And I also have to say that I was a little disappointed that Edgar Wright wasn't directing this film. He was working on this movie well before the Marvel Cinematic Universe was like really formed, and you know, of course they had to part ways because he didn't want this to tie into the cinematic universe, but obviously Marvel did, so they parted ways. But he did get a writer's credit on this one, so I'm really happy they did that for him as well. But does this make it a bad movie? Absolutely not. I had so much fun with this movie. Everything good about this movie, Peyton Reed did very well. I really like the blend of comedy and action and storytelling in this movie, because you have to have humor in Marvel movies, but in Marvel movies past, sometimes the humor is like misplaced and it's in the wrong part of the movie, but this movie blended comedy in so well, and I was laughing a lot in this movie. And a lot of it is thanks to the performances of these actors. I mean, Paul Rudd is great in this film. I bought into everything he was putting into Scott Lang in this movie, and I like Paul Rudd, but when he was first announced to be in this movie, I was like, really? He's gonna be Hank Pym? But then I later found out he's gonna be Scott Lang, and then I was totally on board. And speaking of Hank Pym, Michael Douglas is awesome in this film. He gave so much depth and history to the character of Hank Pym. From the very beginning of this movie, I was sold when Michael Douglas came on screen. And one of the best things I like about this film is the way that it's tied into the MCU. This movie answers that age-old question that all these standalone Marvel films have to answer with, where the hell are the rest of the Avengers? Why aren't they calling all these people? And it gives a really great explanation why the other Avengers aren't in this movie. And it's not like they're trying to just shy away from all the references in this movie. They reference the Avengers in this movie a lot, but the way they do it is so brilliant. And there's one scene in particular that I don't want to spoil. The reference is so in your face, but it's handled so well that you don't mind it. And the action in this film. The action in this film is great. I love the way they utilize Ant-Man's abilities in this, because I really want to see him switch between being small and big and use that in a way that's to his advantage. And they do. They address that very well in this, and they use it, and he's constantly switching back and forth, not just to be used like an awesome effect, but used in practical ways. And then another thing about his abilities is how he utilizes ants. Even trying to say that is I can't say that with a straight face, because he's Ant-Man, and he's not Ant-Man because he can shrink down small, but he can also communicate and use ants to his advantage. And the way they handle that, it's great. I love how he communicates with them, and not only communicating with them, but how he uses them in this movie, and how he uses some sort of allies. And that I thought they pulled off extremely well. And all this can't really be pulled off unless the VFX are really great. And the VFX in this are great. It's done by my favorite visual effects company, ILM. And I said this in my trailer review of this movie. I like how simple the effect of him shrinking down is. And when he shrinks down, they sell his size so well because they use a shallow depth of field. His background's all blurred out, and it really sells how small he is. I didn't see this movie in IMAX or 3D, and I can imagine this movie being one of those types of movies where 3D and IMAX isn't a gimmick. And I can totally see them using that technology to their advantage, just selling the effects so much better. I'm probably gonna go back and see this movie in 3D, because I'm really interested to see if there's a difference between 2D and 3D for this movie. And the one thing that I think this movie separates itself from the other Marvel movies is how it handles comedy. Everybody in this movie their comedic timing is so perfect for their character, and the way the joke blends into the scene, it's awesome. This is what I was totally expecting, because Paul Rudd, great comedic comedic actor. But I really didn't expect it out of Michael Douglas and Evangeline Lilly. I mean, because across the board, everybody's comedic timing was dead on. And speaking of comedy in this movie, I have to mention Michael Pena. He's the funniest person in this movie. He's the comic relief of this film. When I first saw him in the TV spots for this movie, I was rolling my eyes. I'm like, why do they need this kind of character? But he was a very pleasant surprise. Every comedic line that he spits out, I was laughing out loud. I really enjoyed his part in this movie. And no matter how awesome this movie was, I still have a couple of issues. I mean, this movie isn't perfect. And for me, the biggest flaw in this movie is its villain, Darren Cross. And it has nothing to do with Corey Still's performance. His performance was good, but you know, he had very little to work with. The villain is very one-dimensional. There's no depth to him. And I like villains that are a little bit more complex than he was in this film, and it was just, he felt like that typical one-off villain. That was kind of a disappointment there. Another thing that I had an issue with was the pacing at the beginning of the film. To me, it felt like they were just trying to rush character development just to get to the big action scene at the end, which was awesome. But again, it's just, the pacing felt a little off for me. There were certain points where I felt they missed on opportunities to sort of develop the characters. The relationship between Hank Pym and his daughter in this one, I felt that they had a missed opportunity there. They could have used and spent a little bit more time developing that relationship. It just felt the pacing for that was wasn't handled as well as it could have been. So overall thoughts, I had a couple of issues with how one-dimensional the villain was. Wanted to see a little bit more out of him. I had a little bit of a pacing issue with the beginning of the film, but when the movie got going, it took off. I really like how they utilized Ant-Man's abilities in this. The comedy in this is done so well. I was laughing a lot in this movie. If I could give one piece of advice, don't go into this movie expecting like an Avengers type of film. That's not what this movie is supposed to be. The conflict is very compressed down and it's very localized. And it's a really well constructed and awesome heist film. So I'm giving Ant-Man a high five. So, Ant-Man, have you guys seen it? What did you think about it? Leave a comment below, tell me your thoughts. Don't forget to hit that like button below, help me out please. And if you haven't already, subscribe. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching. If you like this, you can click right here and see more videos. Bye, Andrew.